Our next speaker on the stage is Gerard Colomer from Freeverse, coming to talk about living assets. Do we have Gerard? Hey, there you are. Come to the stage, please. And your talk is about living assets. The Evolutive NFTs are playing fair in the metaverse. So give it up, please, for Gerard Colomer.
Thank you very much.
There you go. You got your clicker.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so, well, hello everyone. My name is Gerard, and as you can see from the first slide, we're going to talk about NFTs. But before we walk into that, let me talk about calçots. I'm from Barcelona, and this is a traditional food that we eat there, usually between winter and spring, right? And why I want to introduce this topic just before moving to the NFT part, it's because it's controversial. People either love it or hate it. You have people that eat 20 of them, and people that cannot even eat one single one. Those are onions, by the way. And you put it in a small sauce, and you eat them straight away directly. So this is what's happening on the NFT world, right? And this actually was a meme that was going around in a development group, in WhatsApp group in Barcelona. So it's like, hey, you either love NFTs and you believe that are future of gaming and that it's a must to have them, or you either believe that's the demon in person that are just there to steal your money out of it. And speaking of money, we actually saw that on the last year, those moved quite a little bit of money, but this created all this controversial debate. And what I would like to convey after this talk is that there's some place in between. You can have it both ways a little bit, right? So let's dive into it. First of all, why NFTs altogether? So we have seen already that with traditional gaming, gamers want to trade their assets, and if they are allowed to do it in-game, they will do so. But also, if they want to have real cash for it, they will try to find alternatives. And sometimes those alternatives go completely against the terms and conditions of the games, right? So they go to outside pages, they try different things, they might get scammed. The user experience, of course, it's not the same one as it would be if it's within the game, but there's definitely a need for it. And there are some studies that suggest that even 20%, usually in the South Asia market, of the spend in MMOs, it's done in this gray area space, where it's not controlled by the developer or the creator of the game, and where the user might or might not get the actual item that they are paying for. So why blockchain? Why NFTs? Why all of this, right? Why can I not just put this marketplace directly into my game? So if I have virtual items and I want to sell them for real money, you actually need to have a record on your server of an item that has some virtual, well, has some value, some dollar value. And if you have that, you actually become a bank with all the legislation and all the technical problems that go directly related to that. And with blockchain, you can think of as outsourcing all of that complexity to the blockchain, this entity, let's think about it. And this has the records of the ownership. You don't have it on your servers, so you don't need to have all of this complexity that, for instance, Second Life, that the previous panelists were mentioning, they need to deal with. And they hired a team of accountants, and they actually created a company, I believe, to handle all of that. So let's start from the beginning. What's an NFT? Because probably we've all heard about it, but what it is exactly. And in order to define what an NFT is, I would like to first start defining what an NFT is not. It's not just an image. Some NFTs, and most of them, do have an image representation of it, but it's not just that. It's definitely not a guarantee of IP rights. If I have an NFT of an artist or something like that, maybe it has some IP rights associated to it, but definitely it's not guaranteed. I should definitely check it out. And the blockchain stores kind of a receipt of purchase, so you can see that I bought it, but it's not just that. So basically, what is stored in the blockchain, and this is a simplified way, it's just 3 fields. You have the owner, and that's a huge string of text. That would be me, for instance, and you could say, hey, this is Gerard. Of course, you might need to do the relationship if you really want to know that's me on that string of text. Second thing, you have the ID. a number that identifies that specific NFT. In this case, it's 5,701. And then, one of the most important parts, you have a URL that contains all the information. And you can think of as the 3D representation of the asset. You can think of all the properties. If it's an in-game asset, the speed, for instance, the shoot, if it's a football player, the strength, wherever you want to find it, it's stored there. And there are actually two main ways to do it, right? One way is to have the URL pointing into a server. So all we have seen is stored on the blockchain. So it will always be there if the blockchain doesn't crash. But if you point it to a server, like here we put it this believeme.com domain, if that domain crashes, your NFT actually becomes a 404 NFT, right? So it doesn't have a 3D representation. It doesn't have the properties or the attributes that you wanted. But the nice thing about this, and why some people use this, is because it's quite easy and cheap to change the properties. You can just change something on your server, and the image is changed. And that's why some games use it. The other way to do it is to store it on the blockchain. And there, you have either fixed attributes or an image that cannot be changed, the speed cannot be changed, or any other attribute that you might think of, but it's stored on the blockchain, it's saved. And this is usually what has been done so far in some games, and of course, in the art world. Then, what has been done so far that I was talking about? And we have all seen examples, and those are good. It's not that those are bad, but usually the value of the NFTs that have been created in the vast majority so far is based on scarcity. There's just 100 of those, so pick one up and try to sell them for more later on. This is good, but is it what we want to do for gaming? I don't know. There have been times in blockchain games that have been developed using a little bit this paradigm and trying to move away from it. So not just based on the scarcity, but based on the game. And they faced another problem, that's the scalability. So those two games are two games that are developed and deployed on the blockchain. First one, CryptoKitties, it was released 2017, played it, and it was great until a lot of people started to play it. Because then the network was impossible to deal on. You needed to pay a lot of money, it was not cash, but a lot of Ether in this case, to do any single transaction. And this was a simple, simple game. Just collect some kitties, breed them, and sell them. That was it. 10,000 daily active users, and the whole Ether network was completely not crashed, but it was impossible to do anything with it if you didn't spend a lot of money. Thankfully for us, it has improved. But even this year, beginning of this year, Sunflower, it's a game about farming, and it's deployed on Polygon, which is already optimized on top of Ether. And despite that, with 10 times more users, they were able to skyrocket the fees that the people needed to pay in order to do transactions on Polygon. And this affected not only the game players, but everyone else that was developing on that blockchain. So this is really a problem, scalability. And then, how do they solve all of this? So basically, a lot of those games, they need to have players, and they need to make money. And how they do that is they sell NFTs at the beginning. You need to have a certain number of NFTs to play. And usually, in some games, those NFTs are not that cheap. So you end up with a lot of people spending, and some people on the top that actually are able to sell those NFTs. And if you see it, it looks like a pyramid, right? And this is something that has been going around. It might work for a while, but it's not what we want to go looking forward. So the solution that we believe is that collections and collectionism is good. It happens in the real world. People collect stamps, people collect even motorcycles or other stuff. But it's just a tiny fraction of the real world economy. And why it's almost representing all the NFT economy right now. Let's move it to the next level. So what we are doing with our technology is allowing users to move from just passive, collecting stuff and trying to sell it later on with this speculation, to engaging with NFTs actively so they can change the value of it. And we have put a name of living assets, because in the future, we maybe don't want to talk about NFTs, and we want to put some wording that's different to that. And I wanted to show some examples. So what if you create tons of NFTs, you sell them very cheaply, or even for free to your players, right? And then the value of those NFTs is not high because there are only 100 of them. It's high because I had a player, I trained them really well, and then become the best player in my game. So then it has some real value. I can use it to win more matches, or I can sell it to another player that don't want to put the effort and just wants to win the matches. Another dynamic that we have, and we didn't invent this one, but it's really powerful, it's instead of the properties of the NFT just going up, up, up all the time, what if we apply the Tamagotchi technique? So the properties start to go down, and once they hit a certain low point, you need to actively do something to bring them up. And this boosts retention, as most of the audience will know, quite a bit. So while we were developing our technology, we started to do a football manager game to prove that it worked. And this was a little bit what we played with the two dynamics that we showed. So you need to go to the game and train the player, and you needed to have this player over time improving if you kept recurrently returning to the game. And you could actually see the difference if you were returning to the game and playing with the player, improving his skills and winning matches, or if you just leave it there and do nothing about it. So the actions of the user ended up changing the value of the NFT. And then, just to summary it up a little bit, we believe that in the past, on the NFT world, it has been based mostly on scarcity, high initial price that draw this pyramid scheme that we were talking about. It was hype-driven, like, hey, there's only 10,000 of them, go catch one really, really quick. And that the games were built to have NFTs on them, right? So you had games that were very successful that without NFTs, nobody would have played. And we believe that this is not the future. The future should be somewhere where you could drop NFTs to all your users free or almost free for you without worrying about gas fees or anything like that. You should be able to monetize with engagement like you do in free-to-play games without changing your whole strategy. And these will drive long-term retention, as we have seen before. And finally, the NFTs technology should be built on top of your games, not develop a whole game just to have NFTs on it. You should be able to develop a game and then easily integrate NFTs. So what do we need? We need the scalability in order to reach that. You should be able to have millions of NFTs without crashing any network, and you need to be able to have those NFTs evolve, change the properties. And how do we do that? And don't hate me for putting a graphics card here. We are not trying to move the prices up. We have a layer 2 solution that basically allows us to have these evolvable NFTs and create them in millions just with API calls. API call, hey, create asset, and create 1,000 of them. API call, hey, the player reached level 10, update the asset of the player. That's it. All the complexity is left behind, and we handle it. And also, we store all that information in the blockchain, not in a server like we saw before in the Trust Me domain. And why is that important? Because it allows to have even new dynamics that were previously not possible. For instance, I could have a pot of money or a pot of gold or NFTs, whatever you want to have, and say, hey, the first player that reaches level 10 will be able to grab it. And this is just stored on the blockchain. So it's permissionless. I could have even sponsors putting money there just to promote their brand or something like that. And then the first player that reaches level 10 with the sponsor t-shirt, something that you could think of, can have all that money permissionless, and the blockchain take care of it. So, as a quick summary, and to ramp up so we can have some time for questions and answers, we have talked, this is all a little bit of what we do. We already talked about evolving a scalable, and I don't want to go into detail about the other parts, but just so you know, with our platform, you can have multi-currency, meaning you can pay with dollars, euros, apart from cryptocurrencies if that's needed. So it removes a little bit the friction, that some users have while interacting with NFTs. Then you can monetize the second market that we were seeing at the beginning of the screen. So this gray market that before was just outsourced offline and not that legal, you can have a percentage of the sales that are done between one player and another. And finally, the eco-friendly part. So we have been criticized on the blockchain community for driving graphics cards prices up and for spending a lot of energy and stuff. This is changing, but since we are a layer 2 and we are built upon Polygon, as of now, we are 15,000 times more efficient than Polygon, and Polygon is already built on top of Ether, so this compounds. This was it. Thank you all for your time. We have a booth here, so you can ask questions now that I think we have still some minutes. And if you want to have those questions in private, feel free to hit us in the booth in the section.
That was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll just grab this mic, and then if anyone has questions,
sure.
I can run it through. So
sounds great.
Does anyone have a question? Here we go. Right, I'll come over here. There we go.
Hey, hi there, Gerard. How does evolving NFTs take care of the hashing part, right? Because if the NFT evolves, the hash would evolve. So
yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So that's actually a really good question. So what he's asking is usually the properties of, just to put a little bit of context around, usually the properties of the NFT, if you want to have it in a decentralized manner and so on, are stored in, there are different alternatives, but one would be IPFS or other servers. And how they do that is that they compress all the information that you put there, and they create what's called a hash, just a text, right? And then this is unique. If you change something, this text changes, and this is the key that you use to look for those properties. So what he's asking is, hey, if I change the properties, this hash would change. So how do you have these properties accessible by the blockchain while the hash is changing? And because of that, it's why we needed to build a layer 2 solution, and we could not deploy the NFTs directly on the blockchain. So the layer 2 solution is managing that, is able to change the hashes accordingly, and then commit the files to IPFS or another service provider. If we wanted to build that directly on the blockchain, that would be a main issue, and then you just have two options. You just have server that we mentioned, or you can have a smart contract that changes the properties, but then you pay gas fees every single time you update the assets. So did that answer? Yeah, okay, thank you.
That was great, great question, thank you. We've got a minute or so. Does anyone else have a question while we have Gerard here? Ah, down the front here.
Hey, hello again, Gerard. I just want to ask, with what we're seeing in a lot of digital environments right now, with kind of whales kind of taking over, owning a lot of the assets, and in gaming environments specifically, there's a lot of pay to win. Do you foresee that being a responsibility of kind of your technology to handle putting systems in place to negate pay to win, or is that more of the game designer / developer's responsibility in this ecosystem?
So that's a good question. We just want to bring the tools to the game developers, and we believe that the game developer is the best in their position that they are to have the ecosystem that's sustainable in the long term and that benefits the community or the player base that they have. So with the tools that we provide them, they should be able to manage it. If they want to encourage to have whales, because let's face it, there are a lot of business models that it's whale hunting. They can do that. If they want to do a sustainable community where everyone has a chance and so on, you can also do that. So for instance, what we did in order to achieve that with the video game that I was mentioning before was try to mimic real life. So the players age and they had peak performance, but as the time passes, their performance started to decline, as in real life that you usually don't see football players in Premier Leagues with 50 years, right? So doing that, you are enabled to have to be able to set them for free, and then to be able to have it sustainable because you don't have the market completely flooded with players because you are able to get rid of some of them. That's just an option that I wanted to highlight, but the decision is on the developer's hands.
Great, thank you. And that's perfect timing. We've reached exactly the end. Gerard, thank you very much.
That was a pleasure.